So great to be up here and having a chance to chat with you and have you back at Mertech. You and I crossed paths quickly in the exhibit hall next door, and we've had a moment to reflect on John Taffer's talk this morning, right?
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from what John had to say?
I mean, he was spot on in multiple fronts. You know, as he talked about, just the pressure that we're under, whether it's from labor, the cost of sales, all of the things that are kind of mounting after this pandemic years have kind of now started to thaw. But probably more than anything that I think that he hit on was that technology is the answer. I think for a long time, whether it's from a stage like this or whether it's just personally in my life at work, I've told people that tech is the answer. We got to think like technologists, not think like restaurateurs. And I think that's what he hit on. Technology is the answer. Now, it's not just for the sake of tech, but when you're dealing with labor problems, when you're dealing with inventory issues, when you're struggling with whatever it is, both back of house or front of house, that answer seems to be the one that we keep coming back to. So it just really resonated with me.
Yeah, tech is the answer. And you guys have been really living and breathing that, certainly the last couple of years at an escalated pace, right? But I know it's also a true passion of yours. I'd love to talk about some of the exciting initiatives, some of the bold moves. So we had a lot of fun preparing for this conversation. Why don't we start with robotics, right? We know you're doing some cool things with robotics. What I'd love for you to share with the audience is what are you doing, right? What are you using? What are you doing? Where is it? Okay. And then we can talk a little bit more about future potential plans for it.
Yeah, so there are two different applications that we're looking into robotics. The first one is front of house, and that's the one I'll talk to initially, and then I'll talk to the back of house as well. So again, everybody's dealing with the labor struggles, everybody's dealing with the employee situation that we all have, lack thereof at times. Tenure is a new thing that's for us. We've had lots of tenure in our restaurant, and now that tenure has dramatically been reduced. So we started with Bear Robotics. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but we started playing around with Bear Robotics maybe 2 years ago. And initially, it was all about serving, all about running food to the table. But we didn't have the infrastructure in place yet to allow that to happen. When I say infrastructure, what I mean is our team members had been busing, serving, and running food to a series of tables, one individual. So one individual had 5 tables or 7 tables, and they would do all of that work. Now, they had a partner in crime. We called it team service, and they would work together. The problem was Rita didn't plug into that model very well. And so we call her Rita,
Rita's
sorry.
the robot.
Rita's the robot. That's what we've named her, right after Margarita. So I needed a little bit of time to harden that technology and really understand where else we could use her in the restaurant. So we started with Host, and in 10 restaurants, California, Texas, and a few in Florida, we had her hosting and seating people. So it was co-automation. That's still happening today, where people would walk in, Rita's gonna take you to the table, follow Rita to your table, she sings a song, they follow her, and then they sit down at the table, and then she comes back to a specific spot next to the host stand. We then moved into busing. What we found is that team members walk a ton, back and forth to the kitchen, and to the tables with dishes. And so we felt that Rita could be a way in which to help the team members not hate their job, right? Not hate that aspect of their job. And so Rita's helped a little bit there. It hasn't been as successful as hosting, but it was interesting. When the proverbial bus pulls up and everybody comes in and eats and then leaves, that's when the time that you need a busing helping hands, right? At 9:30 at night before the restaurant's gonna be closed. And that tends to be the application we've seen. And then once we got our new service model rolled out, which was we now call it Team Service Evolution, right, the next step. But effectively, all of our team members now carry handhelds. There's no more queuing at the point of sale system. They order directly from the handheld, and then we've split the runner-server model. So now runners actually bring the food from the kitchen to the table in a timely fashion. Now that we have that model, servers stay on the floor and runners run back and forth, Rita becomes incredibly powerful because she can hang out in the kitchen, you can load her with plates and with food, and you can radio to the team member on the floor, Rita's coming to table 26, catch her, right? They meet, she plates the food, it's a great experience, Rita turns around and comes back to the kitchen. And so that took for us to roll that all out, that was about a 2-year process to get that all laid in. But now today we're in 10 restaurants. We've just made the decision to go beyond. I don't know if it'll be 50 or 100, but somewhere in that range where we'll start to press this and see where it goes. I don't believe that Rita can go in every one of our 1,200 restaurants. It's just not feasible giving layouts and prototypes. Everybody has different layouts of these restaurants that you deal with. But we do believe a good majority of our restaurants would facilitate Rita running around the restaurant. So robot near you coming soon, hopefully in the next less than a year or maybe year and a half.
Sure, sure. You mentioned, you said the word co-autonomous, which I really like. I'd love for you to talk, I mean, listen, we've been in busy restaurants on a Friday night and people are running all over the place. And when there's that human element and you can see and respond and you know that you're not gonna have a crash, right? How does Rita function in the symphony that is all of those moving parts of the restaurant? And how did you get her so that you don't have servers crashing into Rita all the time?
Right. Corner, right? That's the proverbial term we always use in the
behind
people
you,
coming around the corner.
Yeah.
So that took a long time. We had to harden her. That's why that 2-year was really, really important, because the interaction between human and robotic seems very simple. But when you actually see it working with guests that don't understand what Rita's gonna do next, or what team members don't know what Rita's gonna do next, there's this weird kind of dance that happens between the robot and people when they're trying to get around each other. And the robot just says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just gonna stop until the object in front of me has been moved, and then I'm gonna proceed. But that's taken time to kind of work through what that looks like. On a busy Friday night, you'll see Rita being used initially at the host stand, and then they'll move her back to kind of running food. But we've had to be very strategic on where we place that robot during those busy times.
Sure.
Because different prototypes have different angles and different corners and walls, and you know, it would be cavalier to say that that's never happened, that somebody's bumped into the robot, right? It has happened. But that was part of that whole working process of finding what works in our restaurants during the heighten of the demand of a Friday or Saturday night, and how does Rita contribute?
Yeah. Did you find that you had to change sort of the flow and the space in some restaurants in order to allow Rita to be more efficient?
Yes. So, and it wasn't dramatic, but our restaurants, specifically Chili's, will have we'll have booths and we'll have tables and we'll have chairs and we have a bar area. What we found is she's really valuable in the dining room. In the bar area, it hasn't been as valuable. Now, in the bar area not around the bar top, there's a little bit more room where she can move. But we've had to be a little bit more specific and deliberate about making sure how she moves around chairs, where the chair's placed, and how it works. But nothing to the extent that we've massively changed our operations, right? If it didn't fit within our system, it didn't fit. So with some minor tweaks, we've got it to work the way we want it to.
Yeah, I think you used the term hardening the device around human behavior, which I think is a great way to understand that.
There was another part of that question that I didn't get to, which is back of the house robotics. And we're still on a journey on this, not far along as some of the other players in the space. But we are evaluating arm robotic technology in Fry. We're looking at it in other parts of in the kitchen. And we're looking at new kitchen equipment that will make it so that the team members with less tenure don't have to know that it's, you know, smash, right? Put the burger, timer, flip, cheese, timer, you know, all the kind of complexity that comes with cooking a burger on a grill. Can you make it easy? Can you make it, and it's a lack of a better term, but just bullet to the brain simple, right? Just how do you just make it so simple that it just works and it's consistent? And that's the tech we're starting to uncover a little bit with some of the partners that John had called out earlier.
Yeah, that's exactly what John said, right? How can we make it so that the people in the kitchen with less tenure can still be just as efficient?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. So let's shift gears, let's shift topics. I want to talk a little bit about delivery.
Yes.
Everybody's trying to crack delivery. Tell us what are you experimenting with these days, right? What are some of the cool ways that you guys are starting to get the food out of the door?
So I'm super passionate about this because the most inefficient way to deliver food is with one person in a 1-ton car at a gas price of $5 a mile and a half up the road. It just doesn't make any sense. And if you think it makes sense, I'd love to have a conversation with you because it just doesn't. But I think where it does make sense is so vehicles, I'm not going to say are off the table. There's still opportunity for vehicles, but we're looking specifically at 2 pieces of technology. Drone delivery, defined in my term as the sky, right? Flying from point A to point B to deliver a payload. And then I think the other one we're looking at, well, not I think, I know the other one we're looking at is Rover Technology, which doesn't adhere to the Department of Transportation requirements on the road. It actually runs on the sidewalks. And you can see how those are nuanced, right, a little bit, where like Rover Technology, to get your meal to you in a timely fashion after it's been cooked, is probably can't go beyond about a mile, maybe 2 if you're lucky, just given the time it takes for those little rovers to run across the sidewalk. Cross streets, do whatever it needs to do. Drone technology tends to be a little bit more of a further out opportunity as far as length of distance, right? So how can it capture the payload and then go the distance in the time frame in a straight line and then drop that payload into the individual's porch, yard, whatever it may be, and then return to catch the next delivery order. And we've got, and I think there's a couple of restaurant companies that are also working with these same companies, but we're leaning into one in particular, Flytrex, which is a company that is an Israeli-based company, but it's now based here in the United States, and been very impressed with their tech and what they're able to do. There is another one we've looked at. We've looked at Drone Up, which is another one that's out there. And then we've looked into Serve Robotics, which is the company that does the Rover technology. Still, most of these just very new, right? Nothing you're going to see, in my opinion, that's going to explode on the scene in the next 24 months. But I do think that the world of drone delivery, and as my line of sight to the FAA and what they're doing, is very realistically within our grasp in 3 years, in 4 years, right? Of having sizable amounts of deliveries, hundreds, maybe even thousands of deliveries going on throughout the course of a day across the country of having these drones deliver stuff. So it's super exciting.
I'm just like thinking about that operational model of a ghost kitchen with multiple brands firing out and the drones like off and running, the visual of that. And that's the future of food service. It's so cool.
It is crazy. I would tell you, there's still hardening of these devices that have to happen. I know I've used that term before, but you just don't know what you don't know. Does the team member load it? Does somebody else come and get it? Is it drone as a service? Is it taking off from your roof? Like, what is all that got to happen? And that's all still being figured out today, but we're actively seeking to solve that problem. Right.
So you're piloting with drones now.
We are.
How many locations are you doing that?
So today we have one. We're getting ready to announce this week our second in a different state. And then so we have hundreds, maybe thousands of deliveries that we've done in this one location in North Carolina. And in Texas, we'll start again. That's the next location that we'll drop into, and we'll start moving along that front. And then we have a pretty aggressive schedule this year. I can't give you a number, but it will be significantly more than, single digits, right?
Wow, okay, cool. So what's the market that you think is ideal for a drone delivery?
Not urban.
All right, okay.
Right, so you're not gonna see these in Manhattan. If you're living in downtown Chicago, you're not gonna see a drone. If you live in suburban Fort Worth, right? Or if you live outside of Kansas City, Liberty, Missouri. These are areas that are perfect, right? Because they're still they're residential, they're suburban, but there's not a whole lot of density. And as the flight hours for these drones come up, just think about a helicopter and a pilot. They have to have flight hours in order to fly these, and then they have to have regulation approval from the FAA in order to move over certain roads, over certain population densities, fly at night, fly during weather. So there's certain locations that seem to be best for these things. As these companies get more and more experience, that is going to shrink into more and more urban settings. I don't know if you'd ever see this in a deep urban setting. That's why I'm leaning into the Rover technology in the urban setting. But I think that's the ideal spot for a drone.
So like college campuses, right? Think about that 2 a.m. The college kids getting those munchies when they're cramming for their exams. It's a perfect environment for it.
It's interesting to see, and depending on where that college is located, but that or Rovers is an easy way to get it to a college kid who's got the munchies at 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
For wings or something.
Yeah. I know you mentioned vehicles are certainly from a cost perspective not the best way to get product out. Any thoughts on autonomous vehicles?
So I love the autonomous vehicle play. I don't think it's coming in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, I think it's a 10-year runway. And given the rules and regulations of the Department of Transportation. So let me give you an example. So every vehicle that is on the road, according to the Department of Transportation, has to have window wipers. If a vehicle is autonomous and there's nobody in the car and it's raining, it doesn't need window wipers, right? It's carrying a burger and fries. That makes no sense. But the Department of Transportation is very rigid on every vehicle needing to have window wipers. One example, right? Whether that's rear view mirrors or window wipers or whatever it is. I also think that the ability to crack even with LiDAR technology, the latest stuff that they have, a ball bouncing into a street, the dynamic of somebody cutting that vehicle off in traffic or braking hard or not treating it like a human-driven vehicle is problematic. And so I just see that a little bit of a further stretch. I'm sure there's companies like Neuro that would argue with me all day long that that's coming sooner than later, and I will love and embrace that when it comes, but I think just from my line of sight as being a technologist in the restaurant space, that's probably something that's further down the road.
Yeah, yeah, but you are experimenting with rovers a bit, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we've talked about some hot topics. I'm going to throw another super hot topic at you. Let's talk about dark kitchens. Yeah. You guys were getting involved in dark kitchens before, I think, at the early onset, before it was all over the place. Tell us about your ghost kitchen initiatives. What are some of the new formats that you have, and if there's anything that you can share about what's coming up?
Yeah, so virtual brands, ghost kitchens, I view them as two different things. Virtual brands for us were the launch of these brands that we've had. It's Just Wings, and now a line extension for Maggiano's called Maggiano's Italian Classics. We put them in the back of our existing asset. So we own 1,200 kitchens with Chili's. We basically built those concepts out of the back of those kitchens. We've kind of saturated that aspect, right? Our operators are now dealing with, and John talked about it, full dining rooms. He talked about most casual dining restaurants are now up 10 to 15% from where they were, and now they've got these virtual brands on top of it, so there's a lot of volume coming out of that kitchen. We need to go to the next. And so the question then has been posed to us is, what is the next, right? How do you grow that? Because we have 2 or 3 other virtual brands that we've tested, but we're not going to shove them into a casual dining model. It's just too much for the operators at this point. So now it's about growing your footprint. And how do you grow your footprint without dropping a $3 million restaurant and using massive amounts of capital and having 18 months to get a return on that across the country? Yeah. Beyond what we've already been saturated at 1,200 restaurants. And so that's where these dark kitchens get really, really interesting, right? If you can get to a model with dark or ghost kitchens where you can enter in markets that you otherwise couldn't get to. And I'll be very frank with us. We play really well in the suburbs. We're not a huge urban dense group. You're not going to see a Chili's hanging out in a downtown Chicago or a downtown Manhattan. Well, you are now, but we'll talk about that one. Or, very dense urban San Francisco, those kind of areas are really tough for us to get to. And even college campuses has been harder to get around or close by, right? Okay. So ghost kitchens provide that opportunity for us to say, hey, could we build these kitchens within proximity, either a to-go and delivery kitchen, a smaller format for us, or partnering with one of the, or multiple of the members that you're going to have on your panel next. How do we extend our footprint and this new model to get to a captive audience that's wanted and knows Chili's and knows our virtual brands, but otherwise we couldn't build a $3 million restaurant in that space?
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. We have some more time. I have a couple more questions for Wade, but I also want to just do a check-in with the folks in the room. We can do some Q&A with the audience here. So we've got mics in the house. We have a few minutes. We have some time. If you do have a question for Wade, you can go ahead and pop your hand up, and we will we'll get a microphone to you. So if we have any questions in the audience, go ahead and raise a hand. I think we do. We have a question down here. We're getting your mic.
They're coming.
Going back to when you talked about you changed your environment for Rita. Did you change how you did tips with servers and the food runners?
So let me just make sure I clarify the question. Did we change our operating model before Rita? Is that what the question was?
After Rita, since you talked about how now the servers are on the floor the entire time, and you have their team member in the back. Does that change how they're doing tips? Are they splitting tips, higher tip outs, anything like that? And how did that go over?
So great question, great question. So we had been, so I'll start back first. Rita didn't cause that change. What caused that change was our team service moving to what's called team service evolution. Effectively, the difference between those two was that 2 team members kind of helped each other around their tables versus the new team service evolution was now they all carry iPads and they have the point of sale on their hands. Once they did that, we now could separate runners and servers from each other. And we could create a pooling aspect for our runners where the tips that were made from the servers in the tippable states could be pooled for the running team. Rita comes along now and potentially plays a role in now running food to the table, which the team members love it because she doesn't take tips. She doesn't complain, she doesn't take tips, she doesn't slow down, she just, right? So the pool that was then allocated to 3 has now been allocated to 2 runners and Rita, right? So that's how we manage that dynamic. Again, not driven by Rita, more driven by the technology that we implemented right before we put Rita in.
Great question. Yeah. We could take another question from the audience. I think I see another hand up over here.
Thank you. Reliability of Rita. How much uptime versus downtime and issues with hardware repairs? And do you have someone in-house that does that, or how do you manage it?
Another great question. So I'll preface this by saying we have some experience over the last 8 years of having tablets on our tables from 2 different providers that has been hit or miss in getting those serviced appropriately and having a little bit of back and forth of it's lost in the mail somewhere, or the operator didn't do what they're supposed to do, or the supplier didn't provide it to us in a timely fashion. And I tell you, I preface that because when I got Rita in the restaurant, you can't package up Rita, which by the way, she weighs probably 115 pounds or something.
Okay.
Like that. You can't package her up and throw her in the mail and send her off to have it fixed. So the uptime had to be 99.5% at a minimum, is what we looked at when we looked at the total number of hours that she was using. And when I say that, what happens is in the 0.5% that she fails, it's when she was headed to a table to do something, sing a birthday song or something, and deliver a birthday cake, and somebody cut her off or something happened, and she got confused, and then she lost her way, and then she just turns and heads back to the host stand. That also includes things like she didn't start up that morning, so we had to do something with that restaurant. But it's been very minimal. That's the reason for that 2-year time frame. 1, to wait for the other tech in the restaurant to catch up, but 2, to make sure we harden that device. That we're not going into this haphazardly and just throwing robots in the restaurant. They're all going to die and get dirty and break down in a year. The company, Bear is the company that services them, and they're building the infrastructure around us as we progress to ensure that we have boots on the ground when needed, or we have an easy way to actually solve that problem in the moment if it's remapping the restaurant or changing the dynamic of that robot on the floor quickly with our existing team members.
Great, great. I'd love to ask you to take just a little bit of time to talk about sustainability, right? What are some of the ways that Brinker is making some moves to try and increase sustainability?
Yeah. So I always want to do more, and I know you guys are probably in the same boat with us, is that there's a demand for this industry to do more. And we're trying to do more. It's been a little bit of a slow process. Where we're working pretty hard, two areas that I think we're doing a really good job. One is we're seeking solar now in a big way and testing solar capabilities. Many of our prototypes have very broad-based and wide roofs with strategically placed air conditioning units and HVAC systems that actually give us a lot of room to put solar panels potentially on the roof. Or even we've talked about covering parking spaces with big solar panels to see, can we generate enough solar energy and store that to operate the restaurant?
Wow.
Along with that initiative,
wow.
right? So
really cool.
It's test, right? And we're still at the early stages. And actually the biggest problem we've had is trying to find a solar provider that will work with enterprise customers that are a restaurant. That's crazy. You'd think there'd be so many of these they'd be running at you, but they're not. It's
business model opportunity out there.
Believe me, I call Tesla and I haven't got a response yet. So, but we're getting there. I think the other things we're really working on is water usage, and sometimes I'll walk into a restaurant and it'll just be there's just a tap running, right? Well, it broke. I'm like, well, what are we doing here, right? It's water's just running through stuff. Now I don't know how much that goes on. So we're working on with a company. Many of you probably have heard of Powerhouse Dynamics, the ability, basically a dashboarding capability that will look at data that comes up from your restaurant to help you understand what's going on in the restaurant. Power usage, HVAC usage, water usage, all these things that can be monitored so that you can actually get an understanding of, okay, do we need to, is this restaurant out of control? What's the model here? Can we get an ROI on it? And are we truly going to enhance or improve the environment by going more green and being more conscious of the usage of these different products in our restaurant and services in our restaurant? So that and solar are the 2 biggest things we're leaning into.
That's really cool. That's great. We've covered so much great material, Wade. I think we could take one last question from the audience. If we have one more, we can squeeze one more in. I think we do see the mics on the move. One more question.
It was about sustainability.
Oh, great.
So it was just,
We nailed it. Perfect. Well, with that, our hard work is done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys.